Okay, and now for the main demonstration today. And if you want to see the last, I'll repost the last class video so you can see the demo I did for the first intro to acrylics. But I'm going to do a couple pairs. You'll have your choice to work from. And I'm going to start by painting the background pink. And this is because it is good to start with a mid-tone when you start building in your acrylics. It's going to tone down your colors, make them seem less straight out of the bottle, and it'll also help you view your light and dark values. I'm going to be using a piece of plywood, and you'll have your choice in class of using paper or plywood. If it's plywood, I could just paint straight on it because it is a mid-tone to begin with, but I don't really want to see any wood if I forget to layer in any of those spots. So I'm going to paint the background pink, which is a very cool color for acrylic painting. Now I'm going to put down a flat layer. Is this brush okay? Problem with acrylics is that you'll find it just eats up your brushes. So yeah, completely. It's not easy on the brushes. You're washing them all the time. If you don't wash them, they dry up. So it's a little bit of a tricky medium in that sense, a little bit oddly expensive for that one reason. Anyway, I'm painting the background pink. I don't need to make this too opaque as I'm going to be covering it up anyway, but I do want to cover this whole area in a nice even surface. Okay, let me mix up a little bit more of that pink. I'm gonna make it a little bit lighter because this is picking up a little bit too much of the undertones of the board. So let me get this. All right. That's a bit too light, but anyway, I'm going to be covering it up, so not a huge problem. There we go. That's about the color I want. Okay, and now while I leave this to dry, I'm going to mix up the colors for my pear. So I'm going to start this with an underpainting. Now, since this is a beginner's class, you can either just start by trying to paint to mix up the colors of your pear and just start painting directly, or you can try this technique, which is useful in oils as well as acrylics. So I'm mixing up a purple, a dark purple, and I'm going to use this to do kind of a base tonal study for my pears. What this is going to do is it's going to allow me to more accurately place my color, and if there's any transparency in the acrylic, it's going to ensure that I don't have wildly incorrect tonal values. So let me just use the hairdryer briefly. All right, and I'm just going to grab a brush, 1 second. You always want to to use the largest brush for the job. Okay, and now I'm going to use a somewhat dilute amount of this color, so I've added water to it to mark out, and this is going to be in a kind of square technique. I think the acrylics look really good when you don't try to disguise the medium. You know, when for instance, you allow things like brush strokes to show through, but purposefully. So here I'm going to just, allow the shape of the pear to be formed without trying to disguise the edges of the flat edge brush. Just going to make it kind of cubist. And I'm also going to use this chance to mark out the background. Like the background here I'll make darker in a kind of a chiaroscuro fashion. Careful not to add too much water to your glazes or it'll start to eat up the paint underneath it. All right, we've got this. Room for a little shadow. And now I'm going to mix up 3 values. I'm going to keep this really simple. So I'm not going to make a ton of values because I want to make sure I have enough paint to work with. So I don't want to mix up a ton of different things that are drying at different times. I'm going to add some yellow to my purple, and then a little bit of red to make the duller color. You'll be doing a lot of experimenting with color mixing today, so take your time. Don't feel like, there's an exact formula to how you get to where you want to go. With colors, sometimes you just have to sort of fiddle around with your mixture for a while, and in this case, we're just using red, yellow, blue. Know that you will be able to make whatever color you want out of these. It's not going to be impossible. You just have to work at it a little bit, and it's a great way of just learning about color mixing to give yourself a limited palette like this. And also just to know that you can make any color that you want. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to make that kind of brown color. I'm going to make a more orangish tone. Grab a bit more white. So I'm not doing what you would consider like looking at a color wheel and thinking I'm going to add red, yellow, and blue. I'm actually adding little bits of every color, red, yellow, and blue, to pretty much every part of the colors I'm mixing, because in the natural world, most colors aren't as saturated as the colors in your paints are. So you're going to get a range of red, yellow, and blue values in every color that you encounter. What you're not going to encounter most of the time is a pure green or a pure yellow. You're going to have some mix. And this underpainting method helps with that. So even if you do more simple color mixing, like you just decide to use greens, for instance, the red and the purple are still going to tone down that color, so you'll have more of a natural looking piece. So, okay, that's a good pear green. And, okay, I need a lighter tone. As I move to the light, I'm not only adding white, but I'm adding more yellow. You want to think about how colors warm up as they move towards the lightest value. So a brown isn't just you're not going to make it lighter by just adding white. You're going to want to add little bits of yellow and sometimes little bits of red as well as things get lighter. Okay, So I said I'd only do three values, and that's what I'm going to do. Well, no, I'm going to do 4. I'm going to mix together some of that green and some of that brown just to make the mixing a little bit easier. Okay, and getting my flat brush again. There's not a right or wrong here. I'm going to just start with my darker value. I'm going to come in with the brown. Then I'm going to layer in that second lightest value. I feel like it should be a bit more orange, so I'm just going to add a little bit more red and yellow to my mix. And now I'm going to come in with my greens. Gonna add a little bit of yellow to that green. That's cool, that's very bright. So brightest color, the light's gonna come across the front of the pear. And the color's gonna be a little bit more desaturated, a little bit darker as we move towards the back. Don't panic about every brush stroke, because great thing about opaque media is you can always go back over. And also, don't worry about painting outside of the lines, because we can use the background to kind of trim our painting back into shape if it gets too out of order. Now I'm going to mix together a little bit of orange to just add a little bit more intrigue to the color scheme of this. And I'm going to move in with a little bit more red, and a little bit of white to do the stem. Now I want those greens to pop, so I'm going to think about color here. And because there are some blues there, because there are some reds in the pear as well, I'm going to choose a bluish purple as the background color to make the details in the pear pop. And this is the fun part. I love doing the backgrounds because you can just come in and trim off. Oh, you don't want that. Trim off any corners where the paint is doing something you don't want it to, like where it's moving out of the frame or off the reference. Just need to correct a little section right there. 1 second. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white to that purple to make kind of a gray. I'm gonna add a weird amount of yellow to this. Normally I wouldn't really use gray in a painting, but because I want the purple to actually form a shadow, I'm just making the relevant lighter tone of the color that background would be. And then I'm just gonna feather the background so that we don't really know where things are starting or stopping. And I'm gonna mix up a darker blue-purple, the darkest part of the shadow directly underneath the pear. You can leave some of the pink of the background showing through if you'd like for this. It'll create a nice effect. And now I am going to place the highlight, which is always one of the most fun things to do. I'm just sort of dry brushing here. I'm just getting little gleams of light coming across the surface of the pear. I want this to be a very shiny pear. One thing that can look good is to do a super impasto highlight. So that's what I'm gonna do at the end. I'm gonna really put a pretty strong chunk of white right there. Just gonna bring in some oranges. A little bit more yellows that are kind of bouncing back up from the ground back onto the pear. And if I need to darken a color, I'm not using black, I'm using purple. Oh, that's a bit too much. There's a subtle glow on this side of the pear that I want to get, but I don't want to make it too big, so this is going to be a bit of a challenge. Let's see if I can do it. That's too light. Okay, and so I'll just let that, just blend that in a little bit. So if I'm editing something around the edges, I'll just keep a bit of that background color to redefine any edge that's become a little bit lost. And just for the sake of playing around, I'm going to use a hog's bristle brush, a clean one, to get a little stippling on the pear. Just going to use a dry brush, dip it into some of this brownish color, and see if I can get a little bit of texture. Ooh, that's not working. Well, don't love it, but oh well. You live and learn. I can use a little bit of water to pick up some of that. And now for the grand finale, I'll just do a nice impasto chunk of white on the highlights. And I'll have to call that a day. But it should be fun in class because you're going to have quite a few things to choose from to make your composition. And at the end of the class, I'll also be bringing little tiny frames for you to put things in. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching, and thank you for coming to the class.